My name is Bencie Woll, and I have the chair in Sign Language and Deaf Studies, and I'm the director of the Deafness, Cognition and Language Research Center, which is based in the Department of Experimental Psychology. Almost all of what we know about human language and communication is based on research on, well, of course, the vast majority of the world's population, people who use spoken languages. I'm interested in doing research on people who use sign languages instead of spoken languages. These are almost, but not entirely all, people who are deaf. There are some hearing communities that also use sign languages. And I'm interested in the big question of what's the relationship between the channels in which language is used and how language itself functions. So it's really questions about, is language the same in the brain, whether it's spoken or signed? Does the way children learn a sign language parallel the way children learn a spoken language, or spoken language and sign languages learn the same way? What's their structure like? Is cognition in the same as in people who use a sign language as use a spoken language? What happens if you have damage? For example, if a signer has a stroke, are the outcomes similar to those for spoken language? So really the big research question is, what can we learn about the human faculty of language generally by exploring sign languages? Well, we found so far in our research, I suppose, two opposite directions of information. So one is that the brain seems to be surprisingly unaware of whether language is spoken or signed. So damage to the brain, changes in the brain, the language network in the brain is really very similar, even though sign languages and spoken languages appear so different. On the other hand, we've learned something important about language, and not just about language as it's used today, but about how language may have evolved as well, which is that the channels in which language is used shape the sorts of structures that language has. So some of the reasons spoken languages are the way they are is because they're spoken, and they have to be perceived auditorily. And conversely, the way sign languages are is because they are perceived visually and produced with large articulators like the hands. So language is basically a function of the channels that use it, but at the same time, it also seems to be very much the same no matter how it's produced or perceived. Research is important for society. Obviously, it's important for deaf people because as a group, they tend to receive poor education, have poorer life opportunities, experience worse health. And many of these issues are to do with the fact of their being deaf affecting communication both in early life and throughout life. But it's also very important in our understanding of lots of areas of the communication of hearing people. It helps us understand, for example, how all human communication is essentially multimodal and also could be considered amodal, that a lot of it has nothing to do with the particular channel. And that even when people talk to each other, human language evolved for face-to-face communication, so there's always both vision and hearing involved. It also helps us understand issues to do with disorders of language, neurological problems that are either developmental or acquired. Often people say, it's something to do with speech processing, but where we find the same problems in both signers and speakers, we can conclude that these are higher level cognitive disorders. So the work is a benefit both for the people who use sign language and for the people who don't.